Hey, Bobby Manning here. Welcome to the Garden Report. We're back in Boston.
Yes,
Josue
sir.
Pavone by my side.
Finals is back in Boston, where it's supposed to be.
This is special. You see in there on Celtics All Access, just the interior, all the finals designs. It's really cool. And Celtics Warriors just wrapped their practice in there. More Draymond Green talk. How can't there be? He just steals the show in there. We asked about his physicality and the imprint he put on the game and some of the altercations, some of the trash talk with Grant Williams. But you asked about the statement Cedric Maxwell made on his video with Gary Payton there post-game, saying that Draymond Green, what was it, would get the...
We would get knocked the F out. That's what he said.
Knocked the F out in the 80s, if he played in the 80s. Well, here's what Draymond Green had to say to Josue's question about the statement Max made there.
Josue Pavone, CLNS Media. Draymond, along those lines, who's a player that you saw growing up that may have taken that out of you in terms of like giving you that tenacity, that aggressiveness? Two guys that were talking after game two was Gary Payton and Cedric Maxwell, and they talked about that. They got a glimpse of that old school trash talk and physicality basketball that they both, lived. And I'm wondering, obviously, that's been part of your game for a long time now, but is there someone in particular that inspired that, or where did that originally come from, I guess?
No, I think it just comes from growing up in Saginaw, playing at Vets Park, playing at the Civitan Recreation Center. Obviously, and growing up, I watched guys like Gary Payton, Rasheed Wallace. I watched all those guys and how they went about their business. Dennis Rodman, you've seen those guys over the years, and I have a huge appreciation for Uncle Oak. How he enforced things. Like that's a part of the game. Like that is a skill, and so I have a huge appreciation for those guys. I saw what Cedric Maxwell said, and one thing that baffles me about the '80s or the '90s or whatever you want to call when basketball was so much more physical is some of the guys that be talking weren't the guys that was punching people. Like they act like guys was just walking around the court like I'm hitting this guy in the nose. There were a few guys back then that would lay you out, that would knock you out, that would foul you and get thrown out the game. Bill Laimbeer, Rick Mahorn, but everybody running around acting like they were that. Y'all were getting bullied, and so it baffles me when every guy, just because they played in the '80s, just because they played in the '90s. It's like, man, if you played in our day, you get knocked out. Like, no, not really, because it wouldn't be you. So, okay, you saying Rick Mahorn would have knocked me out. Rick Mahorn probably knocks you out. Like, Bill Laimbeer probably lays you out. So were there enforcers of that time? Of course. Would they have knocked you out? Of course. Their fine was also $2. Like, it's just not the same day and age. If I go knock somebody out, I probably get fined $1 million. Like, it just don't work the same. And so, when guys get to making these comparisons or talking about, if you played in this day and age, like, yeah. And if you played in this day and age, you would have had to be way more skilled than you were. And it's just different, like comparing the physicality to the game and everybody acting like they were just the most physical and brutal enforcers. It's like everybody acting like they shoot the ball like Steph Curry today. It's like, then it was physical. Now it's shooting. Everybody can't shoot the ball. Imagine me in 20 years like, man, if you played in my day, you had to shoot. Guys did shoot better and more. But that don't mean you shot that well. And so it just baffles me when guys get out here talking and they ain't got, we got YouTube and you can pull up them highlights and they ain't got no YouTube fights. Like, you see them on the court getting bullied, but they talking about you and got punched in the face. These people be killing me. Y'all enjoy y'all day.
Wow, that was a lot.
I like it. Hey, I like it in the spirit of competition because, listen, both of those guys were saying the same thing, right? Cedric Maxwell and Gary Payton both said that, okay, yes, the physicality, that did remind them of their day. And sure, someone like Draymond would probably get, the brunt end of that back and forth from another team if they played back in those years. But I don't know, man. To pinpoint and say like, oh, well, Max, you weren't doing this or you weren't doing that.
I think Max was.
I think he's got to go check the tape. Exactly. Like there's a few incidents. One that's really lingering over my mind right now, which is, I don't know, jumping in the stands, getting into, maybe that doesn't count for Draymond, but I think in terms of physicality and what was going on in the 80s, I think Max was about that life. So I'm not quite sure about that, but hey, in the spirit of competition, I can't wait to see what Max has to say back. I can't wait to see how the Celtics respond. All this is good for the spirit of competition, good for the 2022 NBA Finals, so I'll take it.
I did like the statement about how in 20 years is he going to be saying, oh, I was shooting threes like Steph, and everybody was shooting like that back
That's
then.
fair. Yeah, that's
fair. That was pretty accurate. And the fine, that's always the best point, right? No fines when you got in a fight back in the 80s. Right. Now you lose potentially upwards of $1 million. I don't know if it's that much, but the fine difference is definitely the biggest. That's why they've legislated out of the game.
That's a good point. That was a solid point by Draymond too. I mean, the players in general are getting paid more money, so there's a lot at risk. There's a lot at stake.
Suspension.
Exactly, suspensions, and that's something that they weren't even thinking about that back in the day. Some of those guys, they would get into a scuffle. They would, clear some guy out, get benched, get a technical foul, and then come right back into the game. Like that would never happen today. Like anything like that happens nowadays, you're missing at least 2 games in an NBA Finals. So it is different.
Draymond also shed light on his trash talk to Grant Williams. They did capture on the telecast saying, you want to be me? He had an interesting thought on him not bringing that to the table if Grant didn't talk to him initially.
Yeah.
So it was a comparison of, when LeBron was talking to me and I was wearing his shoes, he wasn't saying, you were wearing my shoes. Right. Just because Draymond wasn't trash talking to him. He said Grant came to Draymond, said some words, and that's when Grant hit him back with that line, which was a pretty good line.
It was a pretty good line, pretty good comeback. It's as good as it gets because that has been the comparison, since day one, since, Grant's rookie season. Can he be that Draymond guy? He has that outside touch coming into the NBA. He missed 23 three-pointers in a row, however, but he did eventually get that touchdown. So that comparison's always there. And, yeah, that's clever. That's a clever move by Draymond. And I feel like he was just trying to say, look, I'm not bullying anyone out there. I'm just being defensive. I'm just being me. And even though the whole demeanor overall seems somewhat defensive, I can see where Draymond's coming from. He's explaining himself here. But let's see what happens in Game 3. Let's see if he gets that whistle in Game 3, because to go on and say the referees are co-signing, they're co-signing Draymond because of his past and because of who he is, it'll be interesting to see where that whistle is going to be for him in terms of Game 3 and what that means for the game between the Celtics and the Warriors.
Draymond told me he wanted to make the Celtics feel him. He said he didn't think they did in Game 1, and they ultimately did in Game 2. A massive performance from Draymond Green, making statements left and right with his words, with his play. Ime Udoka saying in terms of how the Celtics should respond, said if guys want to engage, if that's them, go do it. Yep. If you want to ignore it, go do it. And he said if he actually pulled the Cedric. When Ime was playing, he would have went and got a double technical.
Composed. And with us, I don't think it's the talking as much, as the physicality that they brought that was noticeable. And at times, talking about the first Milwaukee game where the adjustments Miami made were to try to be more physical. And so we know obviously that's what Green does, and it tries to kind of bleed over into the team. But for us, it's to be who you are. I told him if I was a player or who I was, I'd probably get a double technical immediately, but that's not everybody. And so do what you do and block it out or meet physicality with physicality.
Yes, Ime knows the vibes. Come on, that's not a coincidence, Bobby, because at the end of the day, we know it's a completely different generation. However, there is a line, and Draymond was flirting with that line a lot in Game 2. So all this is par for the course, man. I love the spirit of competition right now between these two teams. The trash talking on the court, off the court. Man, it just makes up for a huge, huge matchup here at TD Garden, Game 3, Wednesday night.
He's Josue Pavone. I'm Bobby Manning. We'll be back here for that. Check us out, Causeway Street. You might see us out here pre-game as we get ready for a big night in Celtics history here. This series tied 1-1, coming back to Boston, 9 o'clock Eastern on Wednesday night. We'll have all your coverage brought to you by com.com/garden. 40% off a premium subscription, sleep help, meditation, and more. Go over there, get it, get rested, and get prepared for some late nights here in Boston. Get your sleep done. Garden Report, CLNS Media, Celtics All Access, clnsmedia.com.